Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole and today I'm going to be talking about books with female characters, but not just any female character, not your typical humble woman or innocent bride or what have you, but the female protagonists that are a bit gritty, maybe a bit morphy in nature, a little bit crazy, a little bit feral and hysterical, and we'll talk about where that title came from. But yeah, I have been seeing people on BookTube and around the interwebs, if you will, talking more and more about books that are featuring women who have just lost it. They've lost their mind, they've lost things, they are about to lose it with people, and have just all in all out gone completely crazy and feral. In fact, some of them I think even turn into feral animals. Anyway, I was kind of wondering about this topic and thinking, have I read books like that? Do I want to read books like that? Am I like that? And yeah, I decided to start looking at my shelves a bit. I wasn't seeing on there a lot of the books that were being talked about. And then when I was at my local bookstore recently, I found this book. Feral and Hysterical. That's where that title came from. Mother Horror's Ultimate Reading Guide to Dark and Disturbing Fiction by Women. And I think my favorite part about this book is not only is there fiction by women in here, there's also a lot of fiction in here that have hysterical, feral, and all sorts of different types of dark and disturbing women. So, yeah, this is a really cool little book. I'm not really going to be reviewing this book, but it's something that you should definitely check out. It was just recently published. So, what I did end up doing with this book is I went through it and I made myself a little TBR, or a to be read list, if you're not familiar with that term. And on that list, I included both books that I've already read, so I'd have some idea of if these are books that I want to read, and books that I currently own, which I was surprised how many books off this list I already own. But first, let's talk about the books that I discovered I had already read. I have a little graphic that I made that includes all the books from that were included in there that I have already read. And hopefully you can see that on your screen now. There are four books that I have read: Rebecca, Ethan Frome, The Romance of the Forest, and Kindred. And I've got to admit, I don't know that these four books could be more different in feel than if I had tried to create a weird combo of books. Well, what are some things that are similar about them? What maybe got them in this book, and how did I like them? Well, let's talk about it. So, one of the things that I could say is true of all four of these books is that they're very atmospheric. Like a sense of place and setting is very much in the forefront of the book. I would say the two that are the most similar are probably Rebecca and The Romance of the Forest. They both very much have a very gothic feel to them. In fact, The Romance of the Forest is one of those books that is considered to have kicked off the romantic slash gothic genre vibe, where you have that classic sort of eerie situation, and there's castles and skeletons and people being chased and who knows what else is going on. And Rebecca has a similar feeling, but slightly more up to date. Like there's no castle, but you do have a spooky-ish weird mansion with strange people wandering around kind of situation. The book that is the least similar to these for sure is Octavia E. Butler's Kindred. Like that's just a completely different setting, time period, and feel overall, where you are in the southern US, going back and forth between a time of slavery and fast forwarding to also being in a time in the 70s, I think, in LA. And that book is looking not at one particular relationship per se, though there definitely is one, but is a bit of a time travel that is exploring dimensions of family and travel and slavery and a whole bunch of other things in ways that only Octavia E. Butler can combine all together. I surprisingly found in looking back on it, because these are all books that I've read at least a year or more ago, I actually really enjoyed all of these books. In fact, my lowest rated one on there was Ethan Frome, and I think I only rated it that low because I found Ethan as a character so off-putting in the book. Um, but when I look at back at it now, this is definitely a book I would reread. And it's one that I still own. In fact, of these four, for some reason, it's the only one I still own. I can't find my copies of all the other ones. Kindred, I know I took out of the library. I swear I still owned The Romance of the Forest. And the same for Rebecca, but I can't find them and I wasn't going to look too long for them. Anyway, Ethan Frome was the one that I originally gave the lowest star rating to. I rated it 3 stars. I really don't recall why. It was before I started keeping good notes on why I gave books a rating. When I look back at it now, if I rated it today, I would probably be giving it between a 4 and a 4.5 star. That said, the one that I know for sure I gave 5 stars to and would not reconsider is Rebecca. The Romance of the Forest and Kindred both had small aspects that I personally just struggled with in the book. For The Romance of the Forest, it was literally just a reference to a bird that was very popular to talk about during that time period and earlier, and I was just sick of hearing about it. Basically, college trauma. And so I deducted points for that. Kindred was actually a very similar situation where it was a bit traumatic, but like the book and the content itself was a bit traumatic to read. And I just needed it toned back a little bit personally for myself. I get what she was trying to do, but for me, it was just a little overdone. And I don't think I've ever felt so sick after reading a book, which may or may not have been Butler's overall intent, but I gave it a 4.5 for that reason. So, my average star rating for these four books is 4.5 stars, and I think that's pretty high to be in a category of books which is like horror adjacent. I think that's all I have to say about that. So let's get into the books that are on my TBR or the books that I want to read that I already own. And I've got quite a little stack of them here. I am not going to get into what every single one of these books is about because there are quite a few of them, but I will talk real quickly about why I want to read them and my thoughts maybe on their being included in this book and my new concerns that may have come up. The first book is Carmilla, and this is the book that, if you did not know, features, as far as people can tell, sort of the first main vampire story. Most people think that is Bram Stoker's Dracula, but this book actually predates that book by about 25 years. And this is a book that is written and features a female protagonist, and she gets into a relationship when she meets another young woman, and things go on from there. The main reason I want to read this book is because I do very soon, like in the next year, want to read Bram Stoker's Dracula for the first time, and I feel like I personally can't read that book without also reading this book. I'm not sure which order I'm going to read them in. I also recently picked up Our Share of the Night. I think I mentioned this in a more recent book haul, and the reason I picked this up actually has nothing to do with the horror element of it, which concerns me with it being in that book. But I became interested in this book after speaking with someone about it, and they're just talking about how fascinating they felt like all the other elements of this book were, including what the horror aspect of it meant, more than it just being horrific in and of itself. And I do think it's fascinating that when I hear people review and talk about this book, that quite a few of them aren't actually just talking about the horror elements. They also seem to be focusing on the themes and the meaning in this book, and that is something that I really like in all of my reads. I really like a book that's heavy on themes and meaning. So that's why I want to read this, and I'm possibly willing over to look the fact that it is classified as a horror novel. Hopefully it's not too scary. The next book I was completely shocked to find was in this book, and that is The Old Manor House by Charlotte Smith. And the reason I was surprised to find this in here is because I actually don't know anything about what this book is about. I bought this book because I was interested in this author being one that I personally hadn't really heard of, and I was curious about it because on the back it talks about how she's been credited with influencing Jane Austen, William Wordsworth, and particularly Charles Dickens, and that she was known for writing in the romantic genre, as in like the 1700s meaning of romantic genre, not a romance novel. And so when I found that this was in that book, I was like, oh my gosh, what is the topic of this book going to be about? Because the back of my book just tells me about the author. And I think when I first purchased this, I did go and look at what the book was supposed to be about, but I also feel like that didn't describe it as much of a horror adjacent, or like anything along those lines, including her writing. The more I think about the romantic genre and Ann Radcliffe and where those things go, the more I'm like, oh yeah, of course it's going to be along those lines. So this is a book that definitely would be considered like the mother of horror and gothic fiction kind of vibe. So I'm more interested in reading about that, but I'm really hoping it's not a haunted mansion or that kind of vibe, but it probably is. Now, I've already mentioned Ann Radcliffe twice, so I was definitely keeping an eye out for her name to be mentioned in the book, and I was happy to see that it was, and that they actually mentioned, I'm pretty sure, yeah, all three of her works that fall into this category. They included The Romance of the Forest, which I've already mentioned, as well as The Italian and Mysteries of Udolpho. I own both of these books because I did read The Romance of the Forest. I really enjoyed it, and that made me want to read even more of her work, especially since there was only that one personal pet peeve that I had with The Romance of the Forest. I know a lot of people say they like The Mysteries of Udolpho even more, and some people actually prefer The Italian. I was reading something recently that was mentioning The Mysteries of Udolpho. I wish for the life of me I could recall what book it was. But one of the things that they were talking about, maybe it was this book. Yeah, it probably was. But one of the things that they were talking about was how they loved The Mysteries of Udolpho for the simple reason that she wrote this to make fun of somebody else's book because she hated the way that person had written his female characters. And so, if I can recall what the book was that she was making fun of, I will include that on the screen. But I don't think I see it here. But anyway, I do love a good gothic novel, and so yeah, I don't know which one of these I will get to first, but I don't think it will matter as far as I'm concerned because I really do want to read them both. This next book I have because I've been keeping an eye out in general for works by this publisher, and that would be, you can see the little B there, and it's put out by Broadview Literary Text, is what they're technically called. Anyway, what is this book about? Did I say the name? It's East Lynne. So East Lynne tells a story of Lady Isabel Carlyle, who is a beautiful woman who at the beginning of the book basically goes and does the thing that women in her time period are not supposed to do, which is destroy the family household. And she goes off to live her own life, and things just go on from there. It's a very interesting premise. I do feel like the back of this book maybe gives me too many plot points, so I won't share them all with you. But to me, this definitely sounds like it fits into the sensation category, which is very heavy on domestic drama. And I think I've had a viewer say that they read and really enjoyed this, and it sounds like something that would be right up my alley. Because if you're getting into like gothic and horror and that kind of thing, and you throw in some like family drama, this is the way I like family drama to occur. What does that say about me? I don't know, but I am looking forward to reading this very chunky book. And I just noticed the previous reader dog-eared a whole bunch of pages. How did I never notice that before? And they've also left some notes for me to read. Not many, just a few, but lots of dog-eared pages. I'll be interested to see why they liked those particular pages in this book. I have a few more classics and a few books that aren't classics that are a bit more well known. One of them, this says Herland, but that's not the book. It's actually The Yellow Wallpaper. This is a collection of books by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, and The Yellow Wallpaper is one of them. I'm going to put it down so as not to confuse you, but that is a short story that is supposed to be sort of a psychological thriller, and I feel like that is something that I also find very fascinating. I did want to get her short story collection there, however, because I also wanted to read the book Herland, but that's a utopian, so totally different category. You know, we're going to think about how it's going to be in the best, and then we're going to be shocked by how horrible it actually is. I feel like that was the vibe she was going for. Another book that I saw in there was Lolly Willows, which now I'm like, what is this book actually about? It is by a female author. It is supposed to be tense, and now that I think about it, I guess I have kind of heard that about all of Sylvia Townsend Warner's books. I have not read any of them yet. This, I'm thinking, is going to be very atmospheric. So it is another family story, but again, it's a family story where the person is trying to break out of that family, not just stay in it and stew and be mean to people. So we'll see how that goes. It's definitely going to explore some interesting family dynamics, and that's what got me interested in that book. Knowing that it's in this book, is making me wonder, like, what's going to happen in her escape. Like, this is not a promising idea for Willows, but we'll see. I don't know that that cover has anything to do with Lolly Willows. I guess I'll find out when I read it. And I guess I'll share the last classic that I have, and that would be We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I have heard a lot of good things about this book, and I actually purchased it before I found out it fell on the horror style side. So I'm gonna make it through this because it does seem like it's pretty scary in a classical way. That which might be all the scary I can handle, but it is a short book, so maybe I can read it all in one sitting during the day. The last two books that I have, both are more modern picks, and interestingly, they both surround food, which is kind of weird that I'm interested in both of them. One of them I think is going to be a lot more body horror and disgusting than the other, but I could be wrong. And those books are Tender is the Flesh and The Vegetarian, which I think is so weird that these books both happen to be in there and then I happen to own them both. And also, they kind of match. I'm really questioning my reading taste here, but I guess I can't yet because these are books I haven't read. So those are on my TBR though, and maybe I'll keep track of them and update you on how this is going. Because I have now officially made a list of just specifically these books so that I can make sure I'm putting them on TBRs and getting through them. I don't know. I'm scared. I'm terrified. I don't know how to feel about all this now that I know the truth and you know the truth. Hold me accountable and we'll see how it goes. Let me know if you've read any of these books that I've mentioned and if there's any that you think I should pick up sooner than later, or if there's any that you're like, no, girl, don't do it. Don't do it. This is a cry for help. All right, that's it for today. And yeah, I'll talk to you next time. Bye.